Slow footsteps halted before the heavy iron door. 7 hours had passed, and the man still knelt there, his knees numb, his eyes empty yet filled with determination. The third-floor hallway of the Lai King building was shrouded in darkness, with only pale yellow light spilling from neighboring apartments. His sobbing and pleas had become familiar to residents passing by. "Let me see her just once. Just once." Inside the apartment, mother and daughter clutched each other's hands, trembling as they stood just a thin wall away from the door. They knew this man would not easily give up. Every phone call, every flower, every letter, all rejected. But he wouldn't stop. He remained there, persistent and terrifying. Police sirens wailed in the distance, followed by hurried footsteps on the stairs. Uniformed officers appeared in the hallway once again, asking questions, taking notes, and then leaving. No one could have predicted that just minutes after their departure, Hong Kong would witness one of its most chilling crimes in history, a crime that would leave a haunting shadow over this building for decades to come. That night, at Lai King Building, a love turned into an obsession, and an ordinary apartment would forever be known as the haunted house. Lung Suet-sze was born into an ordinary Hong Kong family. At 22, she was in the prime of her life. She worked as a clerk, a stable and respected position in Hong Kong at the time. With her tall figure, gentle personality, and pleasant appearance, she was the eldest daughter in the family, with an 18-year-old sister named Leung Suet-yan. Both sisters were very sensible. Their parents ran a small business to make a living. Though not wealthy, the family lived in harmony and happiness. Suet-se's upbringing was unremarkable, but solid. She had studied at an English school in Siu-man, and it was there that she met the man who would change her fate, Siu-man. Because of her appearance and personality, Suet-sze was admired by many young men, and Siu-man was one of them. From the beginning of their acquaintance, he was very proactive, using every means to please the goddess in his heart. Their friends recalled that Siu-man would find ways to talk to Suet-sze almost every day, invite her to meals, help her with English, and even carry her bag on the way home from school. These small but persistent gestures of care gradually softened the young woman's heart, and after some time, Suet-sze accepted his feelings. They began dating, calling each other regularly, and going to movies together. Typical sweet moments of a first love. Siu-man had a rather hot-tempered personality, frequently arguing with others, and when situations escalated, he would resort to fighting. He also enjoyed smoking, drinking, and gambling. However, it was said that after being with Suet-sze, he listened to his girlfriend, actively quit smoking and drinking, and even stopped going to casinos. When Suet-sze had established herself in her clerical job, Siu-man also entered a new phase in his career by passing the police force entrance exam. A bright future seemed to be opening up for the young couple, with prospects of a stable life and a lasting relationship leading to marriage. However, Siu-man's true nature, formed since his youth with his competitive and impulsive temperament, could not long remain hidden beneath the mask of the ideal boyfriend. Despite his position in the police force, a profession respected by society, Siu-man could not sever his connections with unsavory characters. He continued to associate with groups engaged in illegal activities, as if the police badge on his chest was merely a shield for his suspicious activities. Suet-se's parents viewed the situation with the clear eyes of parents. They repeatedly expressed their opposition, not wanting their daughter to be involved with someone as lacking in ambition as Siu-man. They realized that from the beginning, this relationship contained clear imbalances. On one side was Suet-sze, with her desire for a stable, decent life and a foreseeable future. On the other was Siu-man, who seemed unable or unwilling to meet these basic expectations, instead constantly bringing troubles and insecurities. Each time Suet-sze mentioned breaking up, Siu-man skillfully used sweet words to hold on. "As long as you don't like it, I can change." With her kind heart and belief in love, Suet-sze was often persuaded by these promises. She believed that despite her boyfriend's many flaws, his feelings for her were sincere and faithful. What she did not anticipate was that the seeds of sickness were quietly growing in this seemingly sweet relationship. As Suet-se's life became increasingly busy with the hectic pace of work, Siu-man seemed to have too much free time, creating a clear imbalance between the two. His already unstable temperament became even more sensitive and erratic. Suet-se's normal actions were suddenly interpreted negatively by him. When she worked overtime, he thought she was deliberately being cold. When she conversed with male colleagues, he immediately fell silent, clearly showing his disapproval. Jealousy developed into alarming, controlling behavior when Siu-man even began following Suet-sze on her way home after work. He gradually controlled her social relationships, not allowing her to have private contact with any man, and frequently checking her phone conversations. These circles of control tightened, making Suet-sze feel suffocated and imprisoned in her own relationship. Though aware of the increasing pressure, she still found it difficult to escape, as if trapped in a maze of emotions with no way out. The situation deteriorated when Siu-man was dismissed from the police force for disciplinary violations. Many theories were put forward about the real reason behind this. Some suggested he had close relationships with criminal elements, others attributed it to his impulsive temperament and tense conflicts with superiors. Whatever the reality, the final consequence could not be changed. Siu-man was expelled from the police, losing not only his job but also his honor and social status. After leaving law enforcement, Siu-man fell into prolonged unemployment, having even more free time to think and nurture his insecurities. Under pressure from Suet-sze, he reluctantly found a menial job at a local hotel, a position far removed from the image of the police officer he had once been proud of. Siu-man became almost like her shadow, escorting her to and from work every day without fail. Suet-se's friends couldn't help but remark, half jokingly, half seriously, "Your boyfriend is like a shadow. You can't escape." She responded with a forced smile, but inside, her unease had silently developed into real fear. Suet-se's attempts to break up were always stopped by Siu-man's sophisticated emotional tactics. Sometimes he threatened to end his life. Other times, he created the image of a homeless man with nowhere to turn. These emotional performances often moved Suet-se's kind heart, making her unwilling to leave. However, this compassion and weakness gradually became a double-edged sword, silently cutting into her fate. In fact, Suet-sze did not lack rational analysis of this toxic relationship. Her parents had repeatedly and seriously analyzed the situation, pointing out alarming signs from a boyfriend with an unstable temperament and an unserious attitude toward work. They saw through the nature of this man before she realized it, but love and trust had blinded Suet-sze to these clear warnings. In October 1983, a tragic event suddenly befell Suet-se's family when her father was unexpectedly hospitalized with a severe illness. The atmosphere in Hong Kong was transitioning to autumn at the time, the slight chill in the weather seeming to intensify the heavy mood when the notice of critical condition arrived from the hospital. The mother and two sisters didn't leave the hospital bed, taking turns keeping vigil and caring for their father. He had always been a man of few words, and now he was so weakened that he could not speak, and soon after, he passed away, leaving an unfillable void in the hearts of the three women. For this once peaceful family of four, the death of the family pillar was a heavy blow, disrupting everything. It was at this moment when they needed support most that Siu-man suddenly appeared with a completely new demeanor. He brought a group of friends, actively taking on all the complicated funeral arrangements that Suet-se's family was too grief-stricken to handle. Not only did he help receive mourners, but Siu-man also meticulously arranged every small detail: the coffin, wreaths, funeral rituals, food for guests. Everything was coordinated by him in a thorough and dignified manner, to the extent that even neighbors couldn't help but secretly admire him. The dedicated work during the funeral reduced the suspicions of the mother who was immersed in grief. She even confided to relatives that perhaps this young man was truly reliable. Thanks to the change in her mother's attitude, Suet-sze and Siu-man reconciled. She was genuinely moved by the thoughtful care her boyfriend had shown during the family's most difficult moment, nurturing hope that their relationship still had a chance to heal. Suet-se's mother, though still somewhat hesitant, had conceded and tacitly accepted this relationship. She told herself that no one can be judged by a single mistake, and moreover, in the circumstance where the family had just lost its pillar, the presence of a man to share the burden was also necessary. When the relationship had received recognition from the family, the mother and daughters all attended Siu-man's sister's wedding, a clear sign that they had accepted him as a family member. Siu-man did not miss this opportunity, skillfully using the reason of conveniently caring for the family to move in with his girlfriend, the very apartment that would later become the scene of the tragedy. What no one in the family could have anticipated was that the man who had once been so dedicated during the funeral, who had shown such care and understanding, was actually the embodiment of evil in disguise. The first to sense the abnormality was Suet-yan, the 18-year-old sister. As the most beloved youngest child of the family, Suet-yan possessed a straightforward personality. Normally, she only diligently read books and studied, the typical model of an obedient student. With keen eyes not yet clouded by emotions, Suet-yan saw through what her sister could not recognize. In her eyes, this man carried an inexplicable darkness. When not smiling, his gaze was threateningly direct, and when smiling, he made those he faced feel chilled. She couldn't hide her aversion to the sudden presence of this future brother-in-law in her peaceful home. Suet-yan repeatedly tried to warn her sister, "Don't you find him too controlling? Look at how he always watches you as if he's monitoring you." But these warnings fell on deaf ears. Meanwhile, Siu-man clearly showed his lack of respect for shared space by having no personal boundaries. He talked on the phone loudly, turned on the radio each night, breaking the necessary quiet. Worse, he often paced in the living room while smoking and thinking, filling the small apartment with smoke. Being a sensitive student, and in the stressful period of preparing for an important exam, Suet-yan could not tolerate this suffocating living environment. She had complained many times. "Can you be a bit quieter? This is a home, not your dormitory." Initially, Siu-man still tried to maintain an outward appearance of courtesy. "I didn't notice. I'll speak more quietly next time." But gradually, as he felt his position in the family had solidified, he no longer bothered to hide his true nature. Finally, one night, Suet-yan, being truly disturbed while studying, burst out in anger. "Do you have any shame? Making noise here every day. You don't work, staying home, wasting your days, giving everyone a headache." These words touched Siu-man's ego. He rushed forward, throwing a punch directly at the young girl's face with such brutal force that it knocked out 2 of Suet-yan's front teeth. The room immediately plunged into chaos. Suet-sze rushed over in panic, trying to pull her boyfriend away from her sister. The mother, hearing the commotion, staggered out from the kitchen, horrified by the scene unfolding. She shouted in rage, "Are you crazy?" and without hesitation called the police. When the police officers arrived at the scene, Siu-man was still not giving up on his effort to justify his behavior. "She cursed at me. I temporarily lost control." But no explanation could soothe the family's shock and anger. Leung's mother firmly demanded he move out, saying, "If you stay here, we will sooner or later die at your hands." Under police supervision, Siu-man was forced to pack his belongings. As he left, he paused at the door, his eyes a unique mixture of resentment and humiliation. Without a word of apology, without a sign of regret, only an ominous sentence lingered in the air. "Don't think this is over." That statement would haunt them in the days to come, like a warning for a more horrifying tragedy waiting ahead. From then on, the Leung family completely severed all ties with Siu-man, treating him as nothing more than a stranger. Suet-sze thoroughly implemented an avoidance plan, not answering calls, ignoring all messages, even changing her daily work route just to avoid accidentally encountering her ex. But the more she rejected him, the more obsessed Siu-man became. What once was sweet courtship now turned into harassment. What was once admirable persistence now transformed into frightening obsession. Many times, Siu-man stood for hours outside Suet-se's company, patiently waiting for her to appear. He sent flowers, stuffed letters into her workplace, and his most extreme gesture was on Valentine's Day when he wrote an 8-page love letter and slipped it into her office door. But all these efforts were met with silence and firm rejection from his ex. Abandoned and repeatedly rejected, Siu-man's mind gradually became completely unbalanced. In the dark, lonely hours, toxic thoughts began to emerge in his head. I treated you so well, yet you smile at others. If you don't want me, then I'll make sure you never belong to anyone. May 4th, 1984, marked a frightening turning point in this tragic story. At noon, the Leung family's phone rang, and on the other end was Siu-man's worried voice. Suet-sze is sick, currently at Elizabeth Hospital. Come quickly. Without doubt, Leung's mother hurriedly took her youngest daughter to the hospital. But there, they couldn't find Suet-sze anywhere. They asked in every clinic. No patient was registered under that name. The frightening truth gradually emerged. This was just a trap to lure them away from home. Heart pounding, mother and daughter hurried back to the apartment. What they saw exceeded their worst fears. The door opened wide, Suet-sze bound by her upper body to the sofa, her mouth gagged, her clothes in disarray. A horrifying scene, proving that Siu-man had completely lost his mind. Leung's mother, in extreme panic, called the police and called Siu-man a madman. The police arrived at the scene, completing the procedures of preliminary investigation and record-taking. But a fateful decision was made. For some reason, perhaps fear of family reputation or social stigma, Leung's mother changed her statement, omitting important details such as Suet-sze being tied up. As a result, the serious nature of the incident was downplayed. Instead of recognizing this as a dangerous assault, the police handled it as a typical relationship conflict. They neither arrested nor prosecuted Siu-man, not even issuing a restraining order. Looking back, perhaps this mother was concerned about not airing dirty laundry in public, or perhaps worried about her daughter's reputation. But this avoidance directly led to the tragedy that followed. 4 days after that incident, on the afternoon of May 8th, the peaceful atmosphere of the third-floor hallway of the Lai King building was broken by an unusual commotion. Outside the Leung family's apartment door, Siu-man knelt, his hair disheveled, his eyes glazed like a soulless person. His appearance was like a puppet with cut strings, only the outer shell of a human remaining. In fact, this wasn't the first time he had come, but this time, everything seemed to carry a terrible determination, the sign of a man who had nothing left to lose. Inside the apartment at this time were only Leung's mother and her youngest daughter, Suet-yan. Hearing the noise outside the door, they immediately recognized that the harasser had returned. The mother and daughter shouted through the locked door, "Go away! Don't come anymore! We won't pay attention to you anymore!" But these words seemed not to reach Siu-man's ears. He still knelt there with his head bowed, his hoarse voice repeatedly murmuring like a mantra. "Let me see her once, just once." Fear gradually filled the minds of the mother and daughter. They understood that Suet-sze would soon return from work, and if she came home in this situation, a dangerous confrontation could occur. With extreme anxiety, they stood on the balcony, eyes not leaving the road leading to the building, waiting for Suet-sze to appear. Just after 6 p.m., Suet-se's familiar figure finally appeared downstairs. As soon as she saw her mother and sister waving urgently on the balcony with panic-stricken faces, she immediately understood that something was wrong. Without hesitation, Suet-sze took out her phone and called the police. At 6:30 p.m., Suet-sze finally arrived home under police escort. Outside the Leung family's door, Siu-man was still kneeling there, the pathetic image of a man with eyes red from crying. When seeing the police, he immediately spoke up in self-defense. "I just want to ask for her forgiveness. I have no ill intentions." The police checked thoroughly. No weapons, no signs of agitation or threats. Moreover, through exchanges with the family, they understood that this was just a normal emotional conflict. All signs indicated that this was just a heartbroken young man trying to win back lost love. Therefore, they chose to resolve the situation lightly with advice. Meanwhile, Suet-sze had quickly escaped into the house. She didn't want to see this man's face for another moment. Through the thick iron door, her voice rang out cold and resolute. "I will never forgive you. If you don't leave, I will report your wrongdoings to the police." That sentence was like a sharp knife cutting across Siu-man's heart. In an instant, his face became distorted. Outwardly, he quickly returned to a suspicious calm, nodding and saying, "All right, I'm leaving." Seeing him stand up and leave, the police also decided to depart, and the Leung family sighed in relief. But just 20 minutes later, at 7:10 p.m., Siu-man like a ghost appeared again outside the Leung family's door, still in that familiar posture, kneeling. He once again knocked on the door, once again whispered please. Leung's mother, in fear, was about to call the police again, but thinking that the police had just left and not wanting to disturb them, she instead called Siu-man's parents. Not long after, Siu-man's parents arrived in a hurry, found their son still kneeling at the door, and felt ashamed. His mother scolded, "Do you have any dignity left? They don't want to pay attention to you. What's the point of doing this?" His father also advised his son not to take relationships too seriously and to have self-respect. Siu-man quietly replied, "All right, I'll go home, no problem, but as soon as I get home, I'll end everything." Suet-sze, hearing this from inside, coldly responded, "Even if you die, I won't shed a single tear." And at that moment, no one noticed how Siu-man's expression had changed. Siu-man suddenly stood up, saying he needed to use the bathroom, then turned and walked toward the second-floor stairs. Meanwhile, Leung's mother also came out from the house, taking the opportunity to pull Siu-man's parents aside, quietly discussing, "You should take him to see a psychiatrist." At this point, no one noticed that Siu-man had returned. He walked up step by step without a word, suddenly pulling out an 8-inch sharp knife from his jacket, quickly pressing the knife to Leung's mother's neck and threatening the girl standing in front of the large iron door of the Leung house. He shouted, "If you don't open the door, I'll kill your mother." The two sisters hiding inside immediately panicked to the extreme. Suet-sze painfully begged through the door, "Don't touch our mother. We'll open the door. We'll open the door." And the moment the iron door opened, nothing could be reversed. Siu-man rushed inside like a madman. His first target was his ex-girlfriend Suet-sze. He directly swung the knife, stabbing her in the chest, then slashing her neck. Suet-yan screamed and rushed forward to save her sister but was stabbed in the throat. She struggled in pain for a few seconds, then fell beside her sister. Leung's mother desperately cried out, rushing up to stop him, but was pushed down and stabbed several more times. She struggled to run into the kitchen, finally locking the door, which saved her life. The screams and violent sounds echoing throughout the building could not go unnoticed by neighbors on the same floor. They immediately called the police. When the police force and emergency medical staff arrived at the scene, a horrifying spectacle unfolded before their eyes. The younger sister Suet-yan already showed no signs of life, with a neck wound so horrific that no one dared to look directly at it. Suet-sze, who had once been the center of this tragic love story, was barely breathing and took her last breath on the way to the hospital. The mother of the two girls, Mrs. Young Wai-kwan, though stabbed multiple times, but thanks to a strong will to survive, had held on until she was rescued, and after a long time in intensive care, she survived. In just one short night, the peaceful Lai King village suddenly became a place of horror, a location associated with a bloody massacre. According to neighbors' accounts, when Mrs. Young was held by Siu-man outside the door with a knife to her neck, she had almost screamed in desperation, begging her children not to open the iron door no matter what happened. But amid the panic, the two girls could not bear the image of their mother being threatened with her life. They opened the door, and that heartbreaking decision, a decision born out of love, led to an irreparable tragedy. In the darkness of the early morning the next day, the police arrested Siu-man at his parents' apartment in Suet-yan. No resistance, no escape, as if he had accepted his fate. On October 20th, 1984, more than 5 months after the incident, Siu-man officially faced justice when he was charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of causing grievous bodily harm. Surprisingly, Siu-man did not deny his criminal actions. The defense attorney's strategy was not to deny the crime, but to try to reduce the punishment through the argument of provocation. The defense team argued that Siu-man had endured prolonged emotional failure, his spirit pushed to the limits of endurance. They emphasized the statement allegedly made by Suet-sze, "Even if you die, "I won't shed a single tear." Words that, according to them, were the final catalyst that caused Siu-man to collapse emotionally, leading to his complete loss of self-control at the time of the crime. The defense attorney was aiming for the argument of provoked murder, a concept in the Anglo-American legal system that could help reduce the charge from murder to manslaughter, thereby significantly reducing the punishment. However, the prosecution strongly refuted this argument. They pointed to irrefutable evidence of the planned, prepared nature of the crime. First, Siu-man had brought an 8-inch sharp knife, not a weapon obtained by chance, but a tool prepared in advance. Second, he had taken advantage of the moment just after the police left, knowing there would be no timely intervention. Third, the method of restraining the mother to lure the two sisters to open the door showed cold calculation. Most importantly, from the time Suet-sze spoke the words of rejection until Siu-man acted, at least 10 minutes had passed, enough time for a sober person to think and stop. Neighbor Mr. Zhao, an important witness in the case, described that when bursting into the apartment, Siu-man did not have the appearance of someone out of control, but rather like a cold and methodical hunter. Every knife strike aimed at vital spots, but his eyes didn't look like madness at all, more like the cold hunting process of a ferocious animal. On the afternoon of October 26, 1984, after just 45 minutes of discussion, the jury returned to the courtroom with a unanimous verdict. Siu-man was guilty of 2 counts of murder and 1 count of causing grievous bodily harm. Although Hong Kong at that time legally maintained the death penalty, it had stopped executing death sentences since 1966. According to convention, all death sentences would be commuted to life imprisonment by the Hong Kong Special Commissioner of the time. On March 12, 1985, Siu-man, through his team of lawyers, filed an appeal. Eventually, the appeal was rejected, upholding the original sentence of life imprisonment. During the incident, blood had spread from the door all the way to the hallway, leaving traces several yards long. The horrifying screams of the 2 Leung sisters at that time, the mother's wailing cries, had shocked all the surrounding neighbors. But the story of apartment number 16 on the 3rd floor of the Lai King building did not end there. What made this place one of Hong Kong's 10 most famous haunted houses was not just the horrifying murder case, but also the series of mysterious phenomena that occurred afterward. According to nearby residents, less than half a month after the massacre, strange sounds began to appear. Almost every day, at dawn when the building was immersed in silence, the 3rd-floor hallway would echo with the steady sound of high heels with a consistent rhythm toward apartment number 16. Then suddenly stop in front of the door, as if someone was standing there, waiting for the door to be opened. In an effort to erase painful memories, the apartment was rented out many times afterward. However, the stories of the tenants all had the same ending. No one stayed for more than a month. The first person who dared to move in was an elderly widowed woman, someone who proudly did not believe in ghosts. But on the very first night, she heard the sound of water running in the kitchen, though no one had turned on the faucet. Initially, she rationalized that it was just the aging water pipes. On the second night, at 3 a.m., the room suddenly echoed with intermittent soft crying, accompanied by the gentle click of the iron door, as if someone was trying to push it in, although she had triple-locked the door. The old woman had told neighbors, "I'm not afraid of ghosts and I don't do bad things." Yet less than 2 weeks later, she moved out with a brief but haunting statement, "This place is not clean." The next tenant was a young couple, hoping to start a new life in the affordable apartment. They only lasted until the 3rd day. That night, the husband came home late, unexpectedly seeing the figure of a woman sitting on the sofa in the dark living room. He thought it was his wife waiting, but when he turned on the light, the room was completely empty. What made him shudder was not the hallucination in the dark, but the clear indentation on the sofa cushion, as if someone had just been sitting there and hurriedly stood up when the light came on. This couple also quickly left within a week. For criminal psychology researchers, the Lai King case has become a typical example of how love can transform into possession, and possession can lead to deadly violence. It is also a warning to society about the danger of downplaying signs of domestic violence and harassment. And you, What do you think about this case? Please share in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you in the next videos.